And welcome back. It's now 11 minutes away from 7 o'clock, and as stated before the break, we're sitting down to have a conversation in the face of the incident over the weekend in the Sarstoon on Guatemala's claim. And joining us for this conversation, we have attorney at law and member of the People's United Party Belize Guatemala Advisory Committee, Eamon Courtenay. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, William and Marlene.
Now, I want to start off by just having your reaction to what transpired over the weekend in the Sarstoon River.
Right. Well, first of all, I think the party and I think all Belizeans regard it as a particularly serious event. I don't want to exaggerate what actually happened, but from all the information that we have been able to gather, it is clear that a Guatemalan military vessel came into Belizean waters, not by accident, not that it was drifting, not that it lost engine power. It came in with intent, deliberately. That's a violation of our territorial integrity. It's a threat to our sovereignty, and it is a violation of international law. Secondly, that military or naval vessel, along with other vessels from the Guatemalan Navy, prevented Belizeans from traveling into the Sarstoon on the Belizean side. Now, for any military force or naval force to prevent a person or persons within the territory of another country from moving freely within that area amounts again to a violation of our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, and a violation of international law. So it is very clear to us that this is a particularly serious event, and I think that it requires an appropriate response, and that response, as far as the People's United Party is concerned, requires the government of Belize to act firstly. It requires the government of Belize to act internally, that is, to bring together all Belizeans, all groups in Belize, all parties in Belize into a new effort to address this very serious problem. And it also requires a new diplomatic offensive in order to inform the international community and the friends of Belize of this very serious violation of Belize's territorial integrity and our sovereignty, and the risk that results therefrom. We are under no illusion that we are facing a serious risk based on the current behavior of the government of Guatemala.
Now, one of the things that you said publicly is also that there should be a recall of the ambassador to Guatemala from Belize. And that has been met by, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs to say that is not the way to go in terms of...
Well, I think he said it was ridiculous.
To be exact. Why would you take such a strong approach? And is it necessary, and would it signal a change in the diplomatic relations between the two countries?
First of all, and I'm happy that you asked the question so that I can clarify, and I'm asking you to actually look at the press release that the People's United Party issued. That press release said to recall our ambassador for consultation. That is completely different from recalling your ambassador, full stop. In the case of recalling your ambassador, which is the question that was put to the minister, and I can only assume that he had not seen our press release when he was responding. So I'm assuming that he was responding to the question that we had said he should recall the ambassador. That would amount to a temporary or permanent break in diplomatic relations, and I agree with him that that would be ridiculous. We never suggested that. However, it is a long-established practice in diplomacy that where something serious happens between two countries, one measure, one diplomatic measure, is to recall your ambassador for consultations. That sends a signal to this, in this particular case, it will send a signal to Guatemala that Belize regards what has happened as extremely serious, to the extent that we will not speak to our ambassador by phone or by email. We will recall him because we need to consult with him at home in secrecy. it sends a message to the other diplomats in Guatemala and to the international community. Hey, what has happened? Something serious has happened. Belize has recalled its ambassador for consultations. It provides the best opportunity for our ambassador to come to Capital to provide the government, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Minister of National Security, with all the intelligence that he has been able to gather in Guatemala, bring it to Belize, and to share that information with our leaders in strict confidence and in our own home, so to speak. It also alerts the diplomatic community who have a direct interest in this matter that they need to get engaged. They need to find out what is happening, and we are able then to communicate with them and say to them, there is a serious issue here and we want you to become engaged to assist with finding a resolution. So, to clarify, we repeat, we believe that His Excellency Alexis Rosado should be brought home for consultations to inform the government of Belize as to exactly what is happening, what intelligence he has, what information he has gathered, and for the government to devise and plan a strategy as to what our response is going to be. And then he can go back to Guatemala with his instructions. This is a normal thing, and we believe that the serious violation of our territorial integrity and sovereignty warrants this type of diplomatic measure along with others.
Now, the response currently from government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is that they will raise their concern with Guatemala. And they're also speaking about seeking an adoption of confidence-building measures for that particular area. Now, one of the things that we have seen consistently from the Minister of Foreign Affairs is an explanation that seems to be geared towards maintaining diplomacy versus taking a very strong stance as is demanded by the Belizean public. You speak about the recall of the ambassador for consultation as one diplomatic measure. Is the current response strong enough given the incident that recently happened, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I also saw the minister saying that a diplomatic note would be sent, a very strongly worded diplomatic note, and we would expect nothing less. So, from our perspective, again, I think that a very strongly worded diplomatic note needs to be sent. And I have a slight difference with the minister. I have seen diplomatic notes with very direct, very strong language. So there is no need in this particular case for niceties. We need to put our case very clearly, very firmly, very strongly to Guatemala. There can be no compromise on this issue. This is not a situation where you have somebody captured by the Guatemalans who are saying, oh, they were in Guatemala, and we say, no, they were in Belize, and we are trying to find a way to resolve that. This is the highest form of invasion of our sovereignty and territorial integrity. So we would expect, in addition to the recall of the ambassador for consultations, very strongly worded diplomatic note, but there's also further steps. By now, the Guatemalan ambassador to Belize should have been demanded to come to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to explain the conduct of his government and to receive a tongue lashing from the government of Belize. He should be given that diplomatic note, and he should be made to understand very clearly that what they did was unlawful, illegal, and will not be countenanced by Belize, and be instructed to communicate that to his principals. Similarly, our ambassador should have already gone into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Guatemala and used the very same language that we're suggesting to indicate to Guatemala what the seriousness is. Now, beyond that, there's a lot more hard work that urgently needs to be done, which is to convince CARICOM, to convince Central America, to convince the rest of the Americas and the rest of the world that this is a serious incident. Let me be clear. Our understanding, reliable understanding, is that the Guatemalan military and Navy have communicated to the Belize Defense Force that they claim the entire Sarstoon and that they will enforce it. And we saw that on Saturday. Now, you know that the BDF frequently goes into the Sarstoon, and the BDF is extremely concerned that there's going to be a confrontation and there's going to be an incident. I don't know of any way other than urgent, high-level, diplomatic moves to avert that from happening. Guatemala is not going to back down because Belize says so. Diplomatic pressure has to be brought to Guatemala, to bear on Guatemala, so that they resile from the position, so that they withdraw from the position that they have taken. And what our party leader is saying and what the People's United Party is saying is that we are ready and willing to join the government in designing the diplomatic offensive, participating in the diplomatic offensive, and to do our part in trying to convince Belizeans that this is the way to go.
Now let's take the opportunity to look at the claim on the Sarstoon, because this really became an issue, and we do have to acknowledge the activists in the South who brought it to the attention of the rest of the nation. Yes. Looking at the issue of Sarstoon Island and the first excursion that they were planning in that particular area. And it brought to attention, one, the presence of the Guatemalan military, and heavy-handed presence at that. And also the claim that they have been communicating not only to civilians or fishermen who are in the river, but also to our military forces as well. So let's go back to the history of the claim itself and what is defined as our border within the riverway.
Well, I brought it because, again, it's important. And it says the southern, well, I'm quoting here from what the agreement that we were going to have with Guatemala, and it's the same in the actual 1859 treaty, which in effect says that it begins at the mouth of the river Sarstoon in the Bay of Honduras and proceeds up the southern branch of the island at the mouth of the river, continuing up the deepest point thereof to Gracias a Dios. So it's clear. There is an island.
The island is Belize, is for Belize.
Is Belize, because the border is on the southern side, and it's the deepest channel, up the deepest channel on the southern side. There can be no doubt about that. That was from 1859, and in fact, in our case, we would say from before that. There is no doubt about that. Absolutely no doubt about that. And we have agreements signed by the government of Guatemala acknowledging, recognizing, and respecting that. So, the point of the matter, Marlene, is this. Guatemala cannot truly and realistically deny what the treaty says, what the geography is. On the ground, people can go there and see the island, so there is no mistake. Southern, everybody knows where north and south is. We go to the southern, we get the deepest point, and that is where the border is. That gives me an opportunity to raise a point that we believe is critical. During the facilitation process, one of the benefits that came out of it was a study that was done by the Pan American Institute of Geography and History, which is a world-renowned and recognized international institution that does study of geography and history. And one of the things that we insisted on during those facilitation proceedings was the infamous adjacency line. What we call a border, they call in the agreement the adjacency line. How was that delineated? And it was delineated by the Pan American Institute, by the agreement of both parties, going out there using modern technology and plotting what was in the treaty on the ground. And it turned out to be exactly what our border is. Now, what we're calling for is, insofar as confidence building measures should be arrived at and negotiated for the Sarstoon, we should call on the Pan American Institute of Geography and History and tell them this is the definition that I just read. Go there, find the island, go on the south of that island, find the deepest, and track it with the Guatemalans, so that there can be no dispute between Guatemala and Belize as to where that is. We would get Guatemala, through a new diplomatic effort, to reconfirm what we know as a fact. That is, that the border between Belize and Guatemala is to the south of that island, and we need to find the deepest channel, and the middle of it is where our borderline is. That is the type of initiative that we think needs to be undertaken very urgently.
What has led to a kind of a graying of that definitive demarcation? Is it because of our Guatemala's aggression, or just simply because we have not exercised full sovereignty over it?
Well, I don't agree that there has been any graying. I think that what has happened is that from time to time there may be incidents which have been highlighted in the media where Guatemala Navy, Guatemala military, as the case may be, has attempted to exercise their strength and their power and to suggest that they do not respect that line. Those incidents appear, from again our understanding from the BDF, to be on the increase. We are not advocating, and we would not want to have any type of naval or military confrontation in the Sarstoon or anywhere else. At the same time, we have to be uncompromising in exercising our sovereignty and our right to go there. If you don't do it in the face of someone who has repelled your people from going there peacefully, there's a major problem, because we are then weakening our claim. We are accepting, tacitly or otherwise, their assertion that the border is not where we say it is.
The decision to move.
Before we move on from the topic, one of the issues to look at is, of course, the behavior of the Guatemalan military in that particular area. And it is often said, obviously, there's a chain of command within the military itself, and that these individual officers wouldn't make a decision if it hasn't been something that is the position in terms of a change of relationship in that area by the Guatemalan government itself. What is your perspective on that?
There is no doubt, and the evidence is there to prove that, first of all, Guatemala moved from a military dictatorship to democracy. And that, by definition, means that the military is under the civilians, okay? There is no doubt about that. But we had Carlos Raul Morales, the foreign minister of Guatemala, saying to the media emphatically, which is echoing what his president said when he was campaigning, that the Sarstoon is for Guatemala, all of it is theirs, and that they are going to enforce that. They did it on Saturday. So we have it from the mouth of the highest diplomat in Guatemala, a civilian authority, what their position is, and we have, as a matter of fact, on the ground, the military acting completely consistently with the position advocated by the government, the civilian government. Guys, let's not fool ourselves. A forward operating base is under construction. Are we going to stop, or are we going to continue? Guatemala is going to be there. We have Gracias a Dios, we have Cadenas, we have other posts in there. These places have to be serviced. What are we going to do? Withdraw and abandon it? Wilma here was telling me that they are seeing some construction on the Belize side of the river. One of the things they wanted to do was to go there to see who was doing it. Obviously, the BDF has to get in there and find out. If it is Guatemalans, it has to be destroyed and it has to be removed. The point I'm making is that these are flashpoints. These are things that have to be done, that have to be addressed. And with the current stated position of Guatemala and the actions of Guatemala, a confrontation is going to occur. There is a risk for some sort of military incident, possibility of the loss of life. It is in our interest to avoid that. It is in our interest to do everything urgently to avoid that from happening. And that is why the People's United Party is saying that we need a national, non-partisan effort to address this very serious threat. to our national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Now, the call for confidence-building measures in the face of the financial challenges that the OAS faces. We've spoken about that ad nauseum, about this cannot go on forever. This would be another addition to the expense. How should we proceed? Should it be through an OAS initiative, or should we seek an alternative route to talk about confidence-building measures?
No, I think the OAS has tremendous experience in the Belize Guatemala issue, which we need to leverage with respect to the Sarstoon. The point is this, though. We, meaning the countries of the Americas, are the owners of the Organization of American States. So it is not for the Secretary General of the OAS to tell us that he is going to do this or he's proposing this. We have to go to the OAS and build a consensus in the Permanent Council for a decision that this be done. Yes? We have the experience and track record of doing it, and so we need to do it. Now, obviously it can't be done without Guatemala agreeing. But I repeat, this is where we need to call on our friends. We need to call on the Cubans. We need to call on the Americans. We need to call on the Taiwanese. We need to call on the Mexicans, who have always played a key role in assisting both parties when there are serious incidents. And there have been serious incidents in the past, and we have been able to resolve them. But we have many like-minded countries in the region, in CARICOM, who are prepared to go to bat for Belize and Guatemala to ensure that we get the resources needed to keep the OAS office in the adjacency zone and to do whatever is required in the Sarstoon. But as I understand it from a briefing that we received, there is a deep concern because the funds are running out. There are budget cycles, there are allocations, and these things take time. And unless urgent, immediate steps are taken to visit the capitals in Europe and in the United States, in Canada, Mexico, elsewhere, urgently, the office is going to close later this year. Even if it has to reopen, there is just X amount of dollars left, and there appears, and I put it no higher than that, there appears to be a reluctance on the part of Guatemala to do the lobbying to keep the office open. And let us not fool ourselves. That is in their interest. If that office closes and there is no way to verify what is happening, if that office closes and there is no independent person to go and speak to both sides and say, listen, we can see what is happening, this needs to be corrected, and make proposals. If there is no independent party there, it is then between us and them. And I think we all know who has the stronger military.
Now, obviously, that puts the onus on our government to be able to go out and do the lobbying. And as you pointed out, the formation of the PUP Belize Guatemala Advisory Committee, which you are a part of, I'm assuming that this is a part of the campaign you will be carrying out, putting pressure on the government, on the Minister of Foreign Affairs to be able to seek those kind of lobbying efforts?
Well, again, it's coincidental that we're meeting, or we're having an interview today. My understanding is that the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition will have a meeting today. And my understanding is that this is one of the issues that is on the agenda that will be discussed by our leaders. Is there going to be a national effort moving forward? Is there going to be a plan? Is there a role for the People's United Party to play? We have every hope and expectation that the result of that meeting is going to be positive on this score. And I don't look at it at this stage, Marlene, as us having to pressure the government. I'm hoping that today or sometime very soon there will be an understanding of a mechanism as to how the political parties and others in the country can come together and plan the strategy and tactics that we need to deploy in order to advance our national interests. And again, without attempting to be alarmist, we got a briefing from the Friends of Conservation and Development, who again point out that on the land border, the activity is very high. I mean, as much as we want to be friendly with the Guatemalans, we have to defend the national interest first.
And there are structures there that haven't been removed as yet, verified within Belizean territory, and the reason given was resources once again. I want to bring up a very important point, because when we look at the bipartisan approach that has been taken with this issue, up until a couple years ago, the PUP was fully on board with the ICJ process. The position changed, and it seems to be now that there is a willingness to re-engage with the government to have a bipartisan approach. How do you explain, especially to the public who views it as, well, you backed out of the process, but now you want to re-engage with them once again? How do you explain that to the public as to your reasons, whether or not you will be committed to a bipartisan approach?
I think it's a legitimate question and a legitimate issue for people to raise, and they are owed an explanation. I think first of all we have to remember that we are talking about two separate things that are related. The threat, direct threat to our national sovereignty and territorial integrity has absolutely nothing to do with the ICJ. Whether we go to the ICJ or not, that issue has to be dealt with. And what the People's United Party has announced now is that insofar as that is concerned, we are 100% on board with working with the government and anybody else in addressing that issue.
That issue as in the referendum to go to the ICJ?
No, I'm talking about the direct threat to our national sovereignty in the Sarstoon and along the western border, but specifically the Sarstoon at this stage. Insofar as the ICJ is concerned, you are quite right that the position of the People's United Party evolved in the last few years, and there was a shift. One of the reasons for the appointment of this advisory committee by the new leader of the People's United Party is to look at the entire range of Belize Guatemala issues, including the ICJ, including the issue of what position the party should take on going to the ICJ. I want to be clear. The People's United Party took a position with respect to the ICJ and the referendum on the basis of what was happening at a particular time. One, what we regarded as the less than stellar management of the process by the foreign minister. And we cited a number of things that he had said and not said that we found difficult. Two, the fact that the government was not moving very aggressively to deal with the facts on the ground, that is, to repel the illegal settlers in the Chiquibul, etc. And three, we did consultations within the party, and the party members were saying, listen, we're not sure we want to go to the ICJ. What the Honorable John Briceño has said is that that issue is a matter that we have to keep under constant review, and one of the issues that the new advisory group is going to do is to do the consultations. I can tell you this. People have already criticized at the level of the national executive the composition of the group, because they say that all of us in the group want to go to the ICJ, and that inside the party there are different voices. Well, the purpose of appointing the group is experience and expertise, but also to do the consultation. And if the majority of the party says no to the ICJ, then that has to be the position of the party. If the majority says yes to the ICJ, then that is the position of the party. So to succinctly respond to your question, we see the two issues as different, obviously related. Insofar as Belize-Guatemala relations are concerned and the threat to our national sovereignty, we are 100% on board with the government on a national effort. Insofar as the ICJ is concerned, that matter is under active review within the People's United Party. And at some point in time, we are going to articulate a new or a very similar position.
One of the things...
And let me just say this. Let me just say this. We, whoever you are, whatever organization you are, you have to be able to constantly review things, and if things change, to take a different position and to say so and to explain why. And nobody should be ashamed of that. all right? If tomorrow or 6 months from today the People's United Party were to come out and say the majority of our members want to go to the ICJ and want to vote yes in the referendum, then we should explain that to the people and say we had changed our mind in 2015 and now in 2016 or 17 we have a different position. So please, that's the nature of the beast.
There was talk when we were discussing the road to the ICJ about an educational campaign for people in general. We've not seen anything of that sort happen. We've seen presentations talking about the historical overview of this issue coming right up to today. But yet you have these issues, these trigger points that have happened, and it clouds, to my mind, the entire conversation, because people are wondering, does history even matter? How do you get people, in terms of a consultation, to look at the entire issue and almost, I wouldn't say free of emotions, but to make a more objective decision as to what our strategy should be and what kind of an input we can have then in terms of bringing pressure to bear on the government in shaping a policy, a foreign policy with regards to Guatemala that would make us comfortable?
Well, again, information and education, and I think that that process had started and it was going very well. And let's not fool ourselves. Guatemala was the one who once again reneged on its commitment to hold the referendum. Now, if they can't get their act together, and it appears that they will not be able to get their act together anytime soon, then it is very difficult to have an education and information campaign in the run-up to something that nobody knows when it's going to happen. I don't know, simply because I have not had any briefing from anybody in the diplomatic community about where Guatemala is now in terms of holding the referendum, or where Belize is in terms of holding the referendum. But what I would say is, once we know that there is going to be a referendum, there is an obligation on the government to give as impartial as possible an education campaign, information, to inform Belizeans of the facts and the history. Political parties, interest groups, NGOs will then have an opinion one way or the other and will seek to persuade voters and Belizeans one way or the other. And it is only if the Belizean people have sufficient information for them to take an informed decision of which way they want to go that we can have a proper referendum. And it reminds me of a point, going back to Marlene's question about the PUP. We had always said that we should have the referenda in both countries on the same day so that one doesn't influence the other. And we had also said that they should not be held in the context of any election. One of the issues about what you regard as a change in the PUP position may likely have been influenced because of timing. It was in the context of an election, and political parties exist to win elections, and you find from time to time people take popular positions in order to try to get to government. When they get into government, then they try to deal with it. Yes? So my underlining point is that... Well,
currently, can we just, obviously, the amendment to the compromise that allows for the referendum to be held on separate dates in our last update was still before Congress. It hadn't been approved by Congress as yet. So there is a possibility that if it's approved, that Guatemala can go ahead and have their referendum at any given date, separate from Belize. Mm-hmm. So the issue of influence is one that has become more real in this situation. What would that mean, especially in terms of what would happen here in Belize and the PUP's position?
Well, I mean, speaking for myself, first of all, I never agreed and I disagreed with that delinking. Mm-hmm. We should never have allowed both countries to go at different times for the very reason, including others, that the result in one country will influence the result in the other. I mean, I hear people say in Belize that well, let Guatemala go first. If it doesn't pass it, then we're off the hook. We're not off the hook because the dispute remains and it's not resolved. But insofar as the PUP is concerned, we are where we are. I will point out to you that the last I heard from our ambassador in Guatemala, President of Guatemala does not have sufficient members of Congress to get the protocol approved. Now, so he will have to call on the non-government supporting parties to vote in favor of the protocol. Extremely unlikely. So I don't know when that is going to happen in Guatemala, all right? Asad Shoman was making the point that until that protocol passes and is approved and ratified, it means that the existing special agreement stands. Now, I can see the force of that legal argument. And if that argument were to carry the day, you could say to Guatemala, well, you have not ratified the protocol, and therefore the special agreement stands. We're to have a referendum on the same day. Let's fix a date and let's move towards it. So the point I'm making is there are a lot of things that are dynamic, that are moving, that facts on the ground, I keep repeating. If Guatemala is acting in this belligerent way, what effect is it going to have on our voters? Will they say yes or they say no? If we continue to have incursions in the Chiquibo, what are our people going to say, yes or no? If we have the president and the foreign minister saying the Sarstoon is ours and acting on it, what are our people going to say, yes or no? All of these are issues which both countries have to work on to try to have the best circumstances on both sides of the border in order to have a rational debate and discussion about the pros and cons of the going to the ICJ and to allow people to vote. But the current climate is not conducive, in my opinion.
So, because this issue, because we've had the position or the evolution, as you call it, of the People's United Party, this issue, there's some politics that comes along with it, obviously. And the more we have these conversations where the Prime Minister may respond directly to what the advisory committee, the People's United Party Advisory Committee is saying, it, instead of bringing us together, we still have this political divide that exists with this issue. Can we hope to move forward, you think, by having a robust discussion about the issue and look at where our differences lie?
William, I am under no doubt that the People's United Party is going to have a very robust debate within the party. It's going to have a very informed discussion on this issue, and it's going to take a position that it's going to articulate. There is no doubt about that. History is what it is, and it tells you what the People's United Party position has been. We have been in the leadership of trying to resolve this issue. And as Minister Edrington quite rightly says, it was the PUP that had the process where we went through the facilitation, then we went through the process where we said, okay, we will try negotiations again, but Secretary General, you have the right to say, listen, this is going nowhere, and tell us that it must be resolved by arbitration or by going to court. We went through that process and he said, negotiations are getting nowhere, resolve it by judicial determination, and the parties signed a special agreement to go to the ICJ. We participated in that. That has been the history of the People's United Party. And I repeat, yes, the position evolved, but it's not static. It is not static. So we are going through a process of reviewing the situation. I have no idea what the party's position is going to be, but we're going to take a position, we're going to articulate it and make it public. That's what a political party does, and that is our duty, and we will do it.
Let's talk about the Belize Territorial Volunteers for a second, because that is one of the, I believe the foreign minister, and in several times he has pointed out that he feels the actions of the Belize Territorial Volunteers in terms of taking the excursions into the Sarstoon are only causing more hostility in the area. We once had former Senator Lisa Showman, or Senator Lisa Showman, accompany the BTV in one of these trips. And she made a very clear statement that she was there as a senator and not as a representative of the People's United Party. So what is the party's position on the territorial volunteers taking these treks into these areas? Do you share the position of the government that it is not advisable that they continue to do so?
We believe that every Belizean has a right to visit any and every part of the territory of Belize, including the Sarstoon. We believe that the Belize Territorial Volunteers have a right, if they wish to go into the Sarstoon, to do so on the Belizean side. And we believe that the government of Belize has a duty and an obligation to protect its citizens where there is the possibility of a threat to them. And so we say it is the government's duty to get the Guatemalans to stay in their lane, stay on for the side of the waters. That requires hard diplomatic work, and that is what we have to do. We cannot articulate a position that that is disputed territory and therefore we should not go there. Absolutely, we reject that position.
But you don't have to communicate a position that is disputed territory, but it can be a dangerous situation for the civilians who will enter into that area. Right. And that is part of their position. Right. And? You don't share, does the PUP share that same position?
And I'm saying, no. We are saying that Belize Territorial Volunteers or anybody has a right to go into the Sarstoon on our side.
Do you believe that?
And it is the government's duty, the government's responsibility to get Guatemala to respect that.
So in that same vein, do you believe that the Belize Defense Force, as has been requested in the past, should accompany them?
That is their role and function. Okay. Why do we believe, right, that we must be nice in the Sarstoon? What is going to happen when another settlement comes in the Chicky Bull? Guatemala said, don't interfere with my people. What are we going to do? Marlene, you don't seem convinced. I am saying to you, this is a matter of principle. It's a matter of national sovereignty. You cannot accept a position that a person should not go to a part of Belize because there's likely to be an incident or loss of life. I repeat, we will watch what is going to happen with the forward operating base. What is going to happen to the weekly treks of the BDF up the Sarstoon? It's no different. And in fact, it's worse because that's military to military. So this idea that there's likely to be a risk if somebody wants to be foolish enough to go into harm's way, that's their decision. Belize Territorial Volunteers are saying we're being nationalistic and we expect the government to support us in that. And we say yes to that.
So can I ask one other question? Because in the conversation with the FCD, and they were talking about the settlements that exist and what our laws clearly state, but yet, you know, there has been, it's not being enforced because we're talking about how is that different from what we see with the Sarstoon in terms of the principle? Shouldn't the same principle exist?
The same applies. And when we were in government, we spent countless hours ensuring that all illegal settlements were removed. And that was when the OAS came in. They did a census of who was there and who wasn't there and dealt with it. Everybody who came after a particular time had to go build housing things on the Guatemalan side for people to move out, clear out Santa Rosa, etc. This is what our responsibility is. To maintain our territorial integrity means that anybody who is there illegally is dealt with according to law. But more importantly, to deal with it diplomatically with Guatemala, you have to discourage your people from coming over. Otherwise, we're going to have to deal with it in an aggressive way. You know, again, what we used to do, people would come over and plant corn, beans, etc., and BDF would go in and burn it. The Guatemalans asked for some understanding and compassion and said, at least let them harvest it, and then, you know, don't allow them to come back in. In instances we did, and then we had to reach a point where we took a hard line. If you found them, the directions to the BDF was destroy whatever house they have and destroy their fields, because there was a lack of cooperation. In relations between any two countries, you seek peaceful, cooperative, friendly relations, but there are times when there are problems, and problems have to be solved. We cannot, should not, allow Guatemala to bully us. And I want to be clear. Unlike other occasions, I am not here today to criticize Foreign Minister Elrington. The mandate that I have from my party leader is that we want to cooperate with the government on this issue. So that is where the PUP is at this point in time. And whereas we may have differences as to how something is to be done or when something is to be done or what diplomatic move is to be made, that is fine, but it's being done in a constructive and a positive way in terms of what position the nation should take.
So with the bipartisan engagement that you seek as the PUP Belize Guatemala Advisory Committee, you would like to advise or to participate in decisions that are made from this point forward in regards to incidents that take place in the Sarstoon or Chiquibol?
Well, as I say, the advisory group is an internal party organization, a group to advise the party. But there is a national Belize Guatemala Advisory Committee where Lisa Showman was our representative for a number of years. And without going over who was right and wrong and where that is today, the People's United Party believes that we should be back there and it should be a bipartisan effort. So I think the party leader is, if the government is prepared to re-engage, to name a representative to participate in that, and that would be the national body that would be dealing with these issues.
What would you like to see happen now in terms of going forward this incident? Marlene was talking about the territorial volunteers and the treks that they have planned. Obviously, the response from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to, that was sent out before they went there, and the presence of the military seemed very organized. And you've also seen, we've seen reports coming out of Guatemala, both video and in print, as to the heightened response that they've had to Belizeans going in that particular area. What would you like to see, and how can we handle this situation so that it doesn't escalate into a real incident where lives may be lost?
One thing we can guarantee, if we just send a diplomatic note and nothing else, lives are going to be lost. Don't fool yourself, right? I repeat, from the 70s, Belize undertook a massive internationalization effort when people believed it couldn't be done and won our independence. We have dealt with situations where Belizean security forces are captured and imprisoned in Guatemala, and we go in and we get them out when people believe that it couldn't be done. We deal with situations where you have Santa Rosa and other settlements where people believe that we couldn't get them out, and I can tell you, very strong language, very tough meetings with the Guatemalans at the OAS, where we're there for days and we don't even go into the same room because of the way the sensitivities of the issues, and we have to have the OAS going between, shuttling between us. But through hard work, we get them out. I believe very strongly that with the support of friends of Belize and Guatemala, we can return to a situation where our border is respected, where we are able to move in the Sarstoon on our side of the border, and the territorial volunteers and anyone else is able to go into the Sarstoon on our side. I am under no illusions that that is going to take a tremendous amount of effort and expenditure of a tremendous amount of resources. But the national interest requires nothing less than a Herculean effort to defend our territorial integrity and our national sovereignty, to maintain peace on the border. I know as a fact the Americans, the British, and others are very concerned that something is going to happen. We are very concerned. I'm sure the government is very concerned. There's only one bad guy in all of this, and it's Guatemala, and Guatemala needs to get the sense, right? And being nice to them isn't working.
Okay.
Right. Well, on that point, we'd like to thank you very much for being here today and discussing a very emotional but very necessary discussion on this issue as we move forward.
I hope to be back to discuss something more pleasant.
All right.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, it's to be joined by the manager of the Mayan Cable Tubing Limited about the changes to the city along the Sam Lighters Promenade. So stay tuned.